Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and I was finally right about Josh.
Me too. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
yes.
I was right about something.
Joining me, as always, is my co-host Jessica Lewis.
Hello, everyone.
And if you're watching this as a video, you once again already see that for the second week in a row, we have a special guest, the one and only Dr. David Voce.
Yo.
So nice to have you back, Voce. I love
So
this.
nice to be back.
Yes.
And I want everyone to know that before this podcast started, Voce said he was going to be on my side. I'm just saying. So
I may have said that.
I think you did.
He can flip.
We'll see how the night goes, though, Jessica.
Yeah.
Because
all right. I was feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we've actually been trying to get Voce back here on a regular weekly podcast as opposed to the wrap up at the end of the season for like a season and a half now. Ever since his flights messed up when he was supposed to be on for episode 1 of Survivor 43.
Whoopsies.
It's a long time coming here.
A long time. Every time Bloomberg texts me, he's like, "Can you do this Friday?" And I just sent him a copy of the flight that I have for that Friday.
Yeah, he's such a jet setter.
He really is. He's all over the place.
Or else he's doing like brain surgery or something. And then
I mean, come on, really? This or brain surgery?
Well, I mean, this is my first love. Come on. You know that.
See?
Bloomberg.
I mean,
excellent.
I do know you were supposed to be with your mom, but when I reached out, you canceled your plans with her.
I know exactly.
Important.
My mom can't. I had her cancel her flight and everything.
Yeah.
I hope she's not listening.
She's not. Trust me. I don't even think my mom knows what a podcast is.
No, well,
So
yeah,
she would definitely be a little crushed.
There was one time we had it all set up, and then a storm knocked out my power for like 6.5 hours, and it came back on literally as you were getting on another plane. So
it did. This is a true story.
Yeah, I was just like waiting, like what's going to happen here now,
This has been cursed, but here we are. We've made it.
But here we are.
Hopefully all goes well.
We're here for...
What could go wrong? What could ever go wrong when I'm on?
Jeez, so many things.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we're here for everybody. Happy Passover. Happy Easter. I have a peep in celebration.
Wait, we're not supposed to be eating, Bloomberg. Look, see, now you're
we're eating a peep.
It's called a peep?
Yeah, those are peeps.
You don't know what peeps are?
I've never heard of that word before in my life. It's a bunny.
What?
It was a bunny.
But
you really don't know what peeps are.
Never heard of that term in my life.
That is not possible. That is absolutely not possible.
It's an Easter candy. They're called peeps.
It became a candy year round. They just changed it.
Never heard of it.
Chicks, then they're bunnies. I honestly don't know if you're
chicks and bunnies, I've heard of that before, but a peep?
Yeah, peeps.
Is like,
wow.
Don't say a peep. That's how the only thing I know how to use context for peep.
This is fascinating.
Yeah,
I've been stuck in my hole too long.
Now you've learned a new term from the podcast today, ladies and gentlemen. Peeps.
Things I did not expect to learn on Why Blank Lost.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And you're still eating the peep.
Well, that's good.
My mom loves those, by the way. So she'll be excited to see you eating a peep, Bloomberg.
Yeah, they're amazing. My son told me the other day, he's like, you like all the bad candies. You
do.
Peeps,
oh my
gosh.
God.
Like candy corn, you like circus peanuts, you just like everything bad. I'm like, yeah, bring them on. So I said, they're not bad, they're good. But we did not come here to talk about candy and teach Voce about peeps. Although apparently that's a side benefit. We are here, of course, to discuss why Josh finally lost. And I say finally, not necessarily because of him. I mean, partly because of him, but mostly because we kept bringing up his name and I kept expecting him to go, and then he stuck around. And I suspect some of the players on the season kind of had the same feeling. But even with that background, we will compare his game to my rules for winning to see how he did. I, of course, originally wrote those way back after season 1 and have been updating them ever since. We will use all the non-spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. The new version of the rules can, of course, be found at our dedicated page at robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Go there, click on the link bubble for the Survivor 44 rules. Now, before we get to those rules, there are always some other things for us to cover. And so I wanted to start because, Jessica and I are here all the time talking about our thoughts. So, Voce, what are your thoughts on the season so far?
This is that's a loaded question for me because so the whole backstory is that I actually know Carolyn and have known Carolyn since 2019 because we met in an online Reddit group for applying to Survivor. We were applying together, and her personality online is exactly like her personality is on screen. We actually became pretty good friends. She was freaking out that she'd never make it, and I told her, I was like, Carolyn, there's no way that you don't get cast at some point.
Oh, that's amazing.
I was like, you are TV gold. And so in terms of the season, I'll be honest with you, the past few seasons, I have not watched that. Like, I haven't watched live. I haven't watched that thoroughly just because kind of the Survivor burnout after being out there. But this is kind of the first season back where I've actually kind of watched it week to week as an actual season. And I think that, especially with people like Carolyn and Jan Jam, and then, I think that you have a little bit more of original Survivor with the personalities really shining through. So, I've loved the season. I mean, obviously, because, I love Carolyn. I think that, I think before she went out on the season, she was freaking out that she would be cast as some kind of crazy kooky person, and that's it. And, I think that when you look at her, like, she definitely has a crazy kooky side to her, but it's this lovable kooky crazy side that like
it really is
super endearing. It's super raw,
yeah.
And it's super, I think people can really appreciate that side of her. And I think, I think she's an amazing character for Survivor.
Yeah.
And I think that the whole season in general has better characters than, what maybe in some seasons past. So I've enjoyed watching the season this far. I still think that like, you guys harp on this all the time. We just need to go back to, maybe not all the way to the beginning, but like, I mean, just give us Survivor,
I know. Yes.
Like I said, I'm watching every week and I have no idea who has idols at this point.
I know.
There's so many idols. It's so confusing. Who has what at this point. I don't need to see another advantage.
Who you can actually vote for, who you can't vote for.
Exactly. And so I think that takes away you have a pretty good cast,
Yeah.
And let them show the human interactions.
Yes.
And just let that ride. Let that be the TV. I don't need to see someone go to an island and be handed an idol. And that takes, a third of it. So kind of a split dichotomy that I have with this season. I love it because of Carolyn and, got to know some of the other cast members from it, just by association with Carolyn. And, it's fun to watch also Carolyn because before when she was going out to prep, I was like, Carolyn, you have to like, there's certain things that you need to prep for. And one of them was I gave her your rules. So there was even like a confessional where Carolyn was like, I know, like, don't be emotional, be logical. That was her essentially trying to do it in your voice. That was her homage to Bloomberg was her actually, because I was like pounding the rules into her, being like, Carol, just have some sort of framework.
That's amazing.
It's fun to see how that plays out. And it's fun when you know someone like that and watch them have a great time on it. So
I love that she is so very genuinely her.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come across as if she's trying to be a character or she's trying to be anything other than herself, which I really appreciate because I do think that we've had previous seasons where people end up being edited a certain way and then it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel organic and it feels very natural with her because it truly is who she is, as opposed to the show trying to make her be perceived a certain way by the audience.
Yeah. Well, even the very first confessional of the season, which is, before it even starts with her trying to figure out how the fuck do confessionals work. And the producer's like, come on, this is the easiest one. She's like, what? But
and honestly, that moment surprised the hell out of me and probably everyone, because we were
Yeah.
like, wait, what just did they
Yeah.
mess up on the editing? Like, what is going on?
This is the blooper reel.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it
I
is
mean,
confusing, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to cut you up, but Voce probably can understand this too. When you first are being like taught how to
Yeah.
do a
Mhm.
confessional, and they're like, so I'm going to ask you a question, and then you're going to basically repeat my question in
Yeah.
your answer. So then
Mhm.
there's context, and you're like, okay, I have to really pay
Yeah.
attention here, so I know that I say it in a way that makes sense. So yes, I can understand her confusion in that moment.
Yeah, no, there's an art to confessionals, and it's funny if you go back to almost any season. If you go back and watch like the day one confessionals or to day two confessionals, and then you watch them later, you can
Yeah.
actually you can tell that people are like nervous and uptight and like
Mhm.
have not, by day two you just stroll into the confessional and you just start
Yeah.
venting, and like that's like super evident.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely true.
Going back to what you had said about, her saying, I've got to not be emotional. We had talked about, it sounds like, because she made it public after our preview
Yeah.
podcast that she had a poster and she
Mhm.
said, living by the rules, breathing the rules. So,
Yeah.
I did kind of feel like when she was putting on that voice, I'm like, is that supposed to be me? And
Yeah.
so thank you for the confirmation.
Yeah.
I
Um,
love that. That's
It was a great it
amazing.
was it was a great confessional 'cause I'm like,
yeah.
there's Bloomberg on the screen.
So,
Yeah. What
yeah,
have you guys what are your guys' general thoughts of it? Summary up to this point.
Oh gosh.
we could
Uh,
use
uh,
a lot more of the personalities and a lot less of
yes.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
other stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And
you've
stop
got,
repeating challenges.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we'll get to that, but
Oh gosh.
Um, but it's they had to do again at the Mergatory the same thing they did last season. Last season, they had Owen go through and give us this whole checklist that they put on the
Mhm.
screen of who has what.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This time, they had Carson go through it all. They didn't put it on the screen. I put it on TikTok, but
Yeah.
where he's like, well, I know I have this and they have this and they have that and da 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 da. And it's like, if you have to spend time to give us a
Mhm.
scorecard, you have too much.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
Totally.
and it's just not fun.
No.
Right.
It's not.
I remember Jeff saying when he was rewriting, how season
Mhm.
41 was going to go, he asked Mike White, about the
Mhm.
fire tokens, and he said, the metric for adding things into Survivor should be, is it fun?
Mhm.
Is it
Mhm.
fun to watch? Is it fun to watch it play out and everything? And I just don't know where, this almost chaos, how that's fun. I think it's just confusion. Maybe I'm just old and curmudgeon with it. But
Yeah,
I
Jeff.
agree.
Yeah, Jeff thinks it's fun, but
yeah.
He
I
does.
don't know. And so does at least
But I'm
one other
surprised
producer on his podcast.
I'm
So
surprised even them, even they can keep it straight at this point. Which idol
yeah,
is which. I mean, it's there's so many, you know, yeah, it's just
they probably
crazy.
Yeah.
had to hire someone just to do that. Okay, who
Yeah,
has what? I'm going to
Yeah.
write that on this card here, and yeah, I mean it's yeah. Um, Now, as far as the topic, Jessica, that you were getting to,
Mm.
obviously, one thing that a lot of people were talking about this episode was Carson crushing the puzzle because, of course, he had 3D printed that exact one and practiced it a million times.
Mhm.
Um, now, as it turns out, I saw on Survivor Twitter that a lot of recent players have done the exact same thing. Maybe not 3D printing it themselves, but like James from last season said, you could easily buy a whole set of Survivor puzzles on Etsy for like $350. And so like after the season, Carson could make a good side business for himself by just making and selling those puzzles.
Yeah, unless they decide to stop repeating the
oh,
puzzles.
they're not going to do that.
I know,
Clearly they're
but this is
not.
the thing, and I've already complained about this, but I will say it again. Kudos to those people who have the time, ability, the capability to 3D print a puzzle and practice. They are preparing but it's also not the type of preparation that normally comes with something like Survivor, because there's supposed to be an unknown factor, right? You have to prepare for certain things. You know, there might be a balance beam. So, okay, I'll practice, balancing on a beam if I can.
Yeah.
I'm going to do cardio and I'm going to swim because I'll probably be swimming. But when it's so exact and it's the same thing that you can actually memorize, I just feel like it's taking the fun away from
I was
it,
gonna
right?
say, is it? I mean, kudos to Carson for having that dedication to do that.
Sure.
But is it fun to watch him just blast through that
Yeah,
and leave the competition out?
it's
Is that,
terrible.
yeah? And I mean, like you said, that's different than practicing a slide puzzle. Knowing how to do a generic slide puzzle or something
Right.
like that. This is like actual pieces being the same. And I remember, I think it was a medical check that we were doing before a challenge, the water challenge, where off in the distance there was like a graveyard for challenges that you could see.
Really?
Yeah, where there was like old challenges, old challenges pieces,
Yeah.
just laying everywhere. And I mean, if you think about it from a business perspective, from Survivor, it's
Oh,
like, how do
sure.
we minimize, especially in these short seasons where the
Yeah.
turnover is so quick between the days, 2 days or whatever, and they're just having to throw up challenges as fast as possible.
Right.
Just reusing them. But I agree 100%.
Well,
That
I know that they feel bigger is better as far as challenges are concerned, and I don't necessarily agree with that either, because if you do go back and start thinking early Survivor days, and one particular challenge comes to mind because I still to this day find it so amusing that Jeff was the one involved in the challenge where it was Borneo. So I'm going to
They
season
were
1.
standing on the beam.
Yes. Yes. And all they were doing was standing on a beam in the ocean that had wood on, added to make it larger. And he would go out every so often and remove a piece and make it thinner.
Yeah.
And it was whoever stood there the longest. And that, to me, that's a great challenge, because that is like, you have to want it. And that is it's a physical component, but it's a mental component. It's all of these things. And to me, it doesn't always have to be this big production where you have balls as big as, my house, basically having them, and like, just go back to simple. Simple is okay. It's okay.
Yeah. And there was also, Rich Hatch added a singing element to that challenge.
He did. Yes, he did. I remember. I don't know. So yeah, we've complained about that a lot, but this grandiose idea with production is it's not necessary.
Well, and the other thing is with the challenges, it's like I think it's a family show, so I think kids probably enjoy watching the challenges and everything. But it's like after like 3 or 4 minutes of it, it's like move on. Like that's not what we're watching Survivor for.
Except that is, I mean, there must be a large chunk of people who do, because Big Brother is the same way. Until last season, Big Brother had to have some sort of challenge every day. They were on 3 days a week. There had to be a challenge of some sort, to the point that they were making up stuff like, oh, we have to give away a power. Why do we have to give away a power? Because we need them to compete for something on Sundays. And so they, people like challenges. I can put up a TikTok of a challenge and it will get oftentimes much higher viewership numbers than I would ever expect.
Yeah.
And it's not because it's clever necessarily. It's not, it's because it's of a challenge. And that at first I thought, because I first noticed this when I was doing with Jonathan. And I thought, oh, it's Jonathan fans. But then I started doing other challenges. And I mentioned last week that Cassidy winning the puzzle challenge, the hanging fish puzzle, that was, until Carson passed her up, the second most popular TikTok I'd ever made, with like 600,000 views of her finishing a fish puzzle.
I'm curious if, though, it's a TikTok thing as opposed to people just liking challenges, because when you watch TikTok, people want to be entertained. And so they'll start watching going, oh, well, what is this all about? And, oh, this is kind of fun. Whether or not they like Survivor or not, they might just be watching it because it's somebody competing, doing something. So I don't know. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah. I don't know either. I can't figure out how the algorithm works.
Let's do a Twitter poll. Voce's like,
Yeah. So speaking of Twitter and the puzzles, Carson, I believe, did tweet after the episode, as soon as I saw that puzzle, I knew I would be eating ... at the merge feast.
Oh my gosh.
He knew he'd be able
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that puzzle.
Yeah.
And so, but Jeff seems to like it. Jeff, who on the one hand says, I want to keep them off balance. I want to keep them on their toes.
Yeah.
Right.
And someone, I don't remember if, I think Rob may have brought that up on Know-It-Alls also. But he says that, but then he also says, oh, it's fun. And yeah, for a super fan, it is fun to know that you studied it. And just because you studied a puzzle doesn't mean that puzzle is going to come up. Owen has commented that he studied a bunch of puzzles that didn't come up in his season.
Right.
Franny and Matt studied the insanity puzzle, which was the one where you have to have the colors, on the opposite sides.
I did that too.
Yeah. And
I did too.
And they
my God.
and they came in last place.
That's fine.
Puzzle.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But moving past puzzles, but continuing to talk about Carson, in this episode, he told us his master plan. I've already done a TikTok about this, but basically it seems fairly similar to plans we've seen before, especially in the new era. Let the big threats fight, take each other out while he sits back. Then he picks up the pieces into a new alliance to go to the end. Now, many of those making such plans have succeeded in getting to like the final 4, 5, or 6 before being discovered and voted out.
Yeah.
I don't usually make long-term predictions at this stage in the game, but I really feel like we're getting a very similar edit for Carson here to the one we got for Omer, the one we got for Jesse. Now, I'm not saying that's where I want Carson's game to end by any means, but mark it down as a prediction. I think he's going to come in 4th through 6th.
4th or 6th?
4th through 6th. 4, 5, or
okay.
6.
I was like, what happened to 5?
Yeah. No, not 5. Definitely not 5.
He does not look like a
fifth.
fifth.
Yeah. That's, now I also have to say, related to that, there was one scene of Carson pretending to have no idea what was going on that just made me laugh. And it was a quick scene. And I guess it's possible maybe he didn't know, but I think he totally knew. It was after all the chaos, and he was in camp talking to a couple people, and he was like exaggerating the idea. I just have no idea what's going on. I have no idea. And it was just so exaggerated and so funny that I really think it's part of his cover to pretend to be clueless on what's happening.
Although he just killed it in that puzzle.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think he comes across that way though. I think it's very hard to hide if you're that attuned to people. I think people are pretty perceptive out there in terms of who has. I mean, I agree. He's trying to cover his bases way better than someone like Josh. But I still think that he's not fooling anyone when he goes and solves a puzzle like he did.
Yeah.
As a group. I mean, if someone solved the puzzle like that instantly, you instantly know this guy has studied this and is not a normal person.
He's 3D printing puzzles, maybe.
Yeah.
Even if he didn't tell them that, there's no way that you're that good at a puzzle.
Right.
Without having some strategy. And I remember people would talk about the puzzles and stuff that they had prepped for, and so that people had been doing that. And so I just think that I'm not sure how much he's fooling people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They might be onto him.
But he is minimizing his threat level, trying to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, there was another question of whether someone else knew what was going on in the vote, and that was Carolyn. On Know-It-Alls, Rob and Steven said they don't think Carolyn was left out of the vote, but rather was a backup, and voted Kane in case someone played an idol on Josh. Rob also discussed this with Karishma on the Recap podcast. But this doesn't make sense to me because it suggests one of two things. Either if someone had played an idol on Josh, that she would have played hers on Jam Jam, leaving her with the only vote, or that she was worried about a whole slew of idols and thinking that like one vote aimed at Kane could potentially save her. So I really don't think that's the case. And the other thing that I think a lot of people missed is in tribal council, she seemed very surprised when Jam Jam's name kept coming up. Like she was leaning over going, what's going on? I think she was left out of the vote.
Well, and I think we saw a lot of that this episode too, where no one was really listening to her.
Right.
And this was something that I had actually mentioned on Twitter, and quite a few responses were being had. And I don't know if it's just a combination of things for her. One, maybe her personality could be something of an issue because she doesn't have very many people from her tribe left, right?
Right.
And I don't think Josh is doing much to help her either. So she basically has Jam Jam, who is kind of upset with her. So he's probably not helping her that much either. And then on top of it, you're coming to the merge, and like, who do you trust at that point in time?
And yeah, we saw she was overwhelmed.
Yes. And so if she's keeping herself out of the conversations because she's overwhelmed, and then also people don't know her because they haven't been with her, it's kind of just this spiral that you can't stop. So it's quite possible that she was left out just because of the circumstances of it being the merge, right? And then just people finding their groups that they want to be a part of.
Right.
Hopefully she can fit in somewhere.
I still don't buy that she was left completely out of the vote, because you would talk to people and have some sort of sense.
I mean,
I
don't know the reason for it, but
yeah, I mean, it just, to me, I think the last thing she had heard was the backup was Kane. And that maybe people didn't tell her it was Jam Jam because they were afraid that she would tell him. That's another good reason to leave her out. I mean, there's only two of them there that they know are tight.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, she leaned over. If you go back and rewatch as Jeff is reading the vote, she's like going, what's going on? So she, I think, was definitely surprised about that.
And I don't know if they were reading into her responses about Josh as well, because she was trying to convince everyone that Josh that he doesn't have an idol, that it's a fake idol. And I don't know if they were suspicious of that and why she would be putting that out there. Who knows? There's so many possibilities there. And it'll be interesting to see if that's something that's discussed in the episode this week.
Yeah. I mean, someone did mention that to me on Twitter. Like, oh, well, maybe they think there's this plan where they're trying to, she's supposed to say that, but then it doesn't make any sense, because if there's a plan for the three of them to act that way, then why is Josh pointing at Jam Jam and Jam Jam pointing at Josh? It makes no sense that there was a plan like that to distract everyone. And when he has a real idol, when they're making one of the people who's supposedly part of the plan as the backup vote.
Right.
If they had converted it fully to Kane, then okay. But it doesn't make any sense. I think it was just I think they just ignored her. In the end, what do you do if you're worried someone might have an idol? You have a backup plan. That's what they had. There was a lot of chaos to come to a reasonable conclusion. But yeah, and we'll get to more about the reasonable conclusion in a minute. But first, we still have a few more things, because last week we discussed Matt and Franny, and we saw another scene of them this week, holding hands and talking while they were off away from the rest of the tribe at night. Apparently because
ding, ding, ding. That's a big thing.
Well, but yes, but people said the shelter couldn't hold everyone. So Franny was like, oh, it's dry under there. And then she and Matt were the only ones who actually went over there. Like, I think she was expecting more people to come.
But I mean, Voce knows the sleeping arrangements matter. Like, whoever you're sleeping next to or willing to sleep next to, that matters.
Now, I posted a TikTok about this too already, including a correction of
your TikToks.
Yeah, some scientific language that they used while they were talking nerdy to each other. But the key was them discussing how they wanted to keep their little budding romance a secret. And first, I don't think it's that much of a secret, other than to Jamie, maybe. But second, it's very interesting to me that almost all the Franny content we've gotten has been her and Matt.
Yeah.
While Josh said in exit interviews that she's very knowledgeable about Survivor.
Yeah.
And it feels like they've been choosing to show these moments instead of game moments for her. I mean, she hasn't had much opportunity for game moments till now. So maybe we'll get some more, but it, in some ways, I mean, it's adorable. Don't get me wrong. But if she's having game moments, we need to see those too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Less challenge time, more strategizing and social time.
Yes. Now, another thing that came up in Josh's interviews, some of his interviews, but which won't pertain to our discussion of the rules, was that he passed out a couple times in the game. The most recent was actually shown as a secret scene, but he told Dalton Ross that because of his medical conditions, his blood sugar went low and he has low blood pressure. So sometimes like standing up too quickly would cause him to get lightheaded and fall down. He also mentioned that he wishes the show would have highlighted his conditions and how hard it was to play with all of that going on. I just feel like him hiding it from everyone around him, which we'll discuss in just a couple minutes here, made it more complicated for production to put the time into showing what he wanted to show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things when you're out there that you're like, oh, I hope they see this. I hope this is shown. But they have so many people and so little time, and they have to make the story make sense. And he's someone who is out before the merge. So how much time do they want to spend on that other side of him? Not that it doesn't deserve to be.
What's wrong with people going out before the merge, Jessica?
Nothing is wrong with it. I'm just saying, as far as their story is concerned.
Oh, so our stories aren't as important.
No.
Sorry,
Listen,
we're not as important as you, Jessica.
I did not say that. What I'm saying is they work backwards, and so they're going to focus on those things. Trust me, there's a lot of content you didn't see about me. I was best buds with the winner of my season out there, and you didn't see that. So they make choices, right? They definitely make choices. Listen,
I think you just flipped him back to me.
I might have, but that wasn't my intention. My intention was
it's never
they have
the
a
intent
story.
to flip someone the wrong direction.
Oh, Lord,
we'll talk about that in a few minutes too. Now,
so sensitive.
Normally this is where we'd have our Jeff Probst is wrong about blank segment, but his podcast this week was almost all about the art department, and they had another stupid topic for why he supposedly sucks. So
this is podcast. I haven't caught any of his podcasts. Is it what is the general?
I mean, it's mostly about production stuff. It's not a recap. It doesn't talk very much about the episode at all. But he often says things in there that are just wrong, which helps this segment.
Hence what it's called.
Yes. And there's a segment that he has that's called This Is Why Jeff Sucks, where people write in and one of the other producers reads it to him. And last week I mentioned that the previous two were really stupid, and this one's really stupid too. Like, this one was complaining about him saying the tribe has spoken. Like, really, this is what you're complaining. Don't complain about reusing the puzzles. Don't complain about.
I guarantee you, though, there are so many people who are complaining about that, and they're just like, no, we're not going to give that any attention.
Right, exactly.
Just tell them to read Bloomberg's submissions.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Let's start doing that.
Yeah,
that would be great.
So, was there any? I know we covered a lot. Was there anything else either of you two wanted to get to before we go to the rules?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
We're ready.
Well, we're not quite ready because we need to do the shorter version of the rules
That's
first.
Right. Ta-da!
The shorter and much more colorful version of the rules. And you can find those at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Go there, scroll down, and it's really hard to miss because, it's a big poster of the rules.
That's right.
And so you can click on that, and order the poster. You can scroll down a little more and order the poster on a T-shirt, much like I'm wearing. Or you can order the checklist on a T-shirt. Not as colorful, but still cool. So yeah, you can, like I said, go to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed, and you can get that. So with that, let's move into Josh, because Josh seems to be a very nice guy outside the game. And even inside the game, some said he was a good social player. But people had questions about him. Josh said in his final words, and then many times in his post-game interviews, that he was seen as a threat. And I have to admit, I was scratching my head about that one a bit, and I wasn't alone. So many people had him pegged and had caught on to what he was doing. How did that make him a threat? And how does all of this relate back to his decision to hide so much about his real life? Let's tie it all together as we figure out why Josh lost. Now, we, of course, begin with the first and most important rule, which is to scheme and plot. And this time, I think we need to combine it with the seventh rule, too, as that covers idols and advantages and game mechanics. And actually, spoiler alert, part of Rule 7 will also come into play in the second rule. We're kind of dividing it up. We just can't separate it out because so much of Josh's scheming dealt with idols, both real and fake. And so with that in mind, we might as well start off with Josh trying to bluff his way in the lead up to the tribal council that didn't happen, as he claimed to have a second idol. Now, we discussed last week how laughable his attempted fake idol was, with his use of the tree mail beads and reusing the same note he'd shown Carolyn. Neither her nor Jam Jam were buying it, and he knew it. But he was given new life with Murgatory and decided to try to cause some drama and chaos, according to his interviews. And this is indeed scheming and plotting. I don't think it's good scheming and plotting, but it's, it's a start, I guess.
I love that you say that it's not good scheming and plotting, because I do think that people probably feel the first rule to scheme and plot, we focus on a lot of the positive scheming and plotting that people do. And though he was scheming and plotting, yes, it was not good. So it's like you get the check for yes that you did it, but not so great. Yeah.
Well, and going back to what you were saying about his laughable, the fake idol that he made, regardless of, I mean, Survivor has thrown out some pretty pitiful looking idols recently, where
True.
it's like, is that really an idol? But the thing is like, if you have an idol, you don't come out generally and just say it. You would plant it so someone could see that you have it somewhere, something like that. But coming out, it's almost, again, his scheming, it was like he didn't think through his scheming enough to be like, wait, this isn't believable to just say, no, I have another one. It's like you wouldn't, that's not the way that you would kind of bleed into it.
Especially in a 3-person tribe.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time originally, like, who cares? Who cares who's on your side? If both of them are actually against you, you don't need to tell either of them that you have an idol. Go to tribal council, play your idol, vote out who you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so then to come back to everybody and start planting it, and then he told a couple different stories. He told Brandon that he got the real idol from the cage, so he could track that story. And he told Jamie it was fake. But then, the reason he told Jamie, he told Mike Bloom in an interview, he said, I trusted Jamie a lot because we went on that journey. We kind of had a connection. The edit only goes so far, but we were pretty close. And so I'm going to time out on the idol for a second, because I don't really get this. The journey lasted, maybe an hour or two before they were split to go their separate ways and back to their different tribes. And because of that, he thought he was close to her. It seems to put a lot of weight on a fairly flimsy base.
I feel like he had that approach with a lot of the relationships, which I know this might be delving into another rule, but it doesn't seem to be limited to only Jamie. And so I'm curious if he just wasn't able to read people the way that you need to be able to read them when you're playing this game.
Well, the interview with Claire earlier in the season, Claire said that he was cagey.
Yes.
And I think even when I was going out there, people asked, why didn't you lie about your profession? Say something else.
Mhm.
And for me, and he's a podiatrist too, who's been through all the schooling and everything. That's like part of his life. That's who he is and what he does.
Right. Right.
So I think that, I know, Jessica, you said that you were a photographer, and so
Mhm.
you can speak to that. But I'm not sure if you found that hard to like separate out, you know, uh, truth from reality in terms of when you talk about your relationships. But I think what could be different is that like you have your family and everything to kind of really uh,
Yes.
invest in with other people that are on the island. Whereas,
Mhm.
for someone that's just out of, podiatry school and,
Yeah.
is going into podiatry, I mean, I would think that his life up to this point has been pretty centered around all of his schooling, his illness, and everything. And so when you remove that, if he's going to lie
Mhm.
about everything, then what is he actually connecting with other than, we saw the Jam Jam conversation about, their coming out stories. I think that was a very real, raw moment
Mhm.
that he had.
Mhm.
But I just wonder how many of those moments was he actually having because he was scheming and plotting to not reveal who he was.
Yes.
And
And I
I think,
think that's a very fair point because it takes away from your ability to scheme and plot in the game if you're having to be so careful about what
yeah,
you say and how you say it.
yeah,
Now, and you were completely correct with I had a great ability to shift and talk about family and kids and that was more of my focus. And then also I used to be a photographer, so it was very easy for
yeah,
me to talk about anything related to that profession as well. And that's just, and also I think my profession probably helps me be a little bit more of a storyteller. And so
yeah,
I think overall it worked for me, but it also worked for two other people on my season as well that did the same
yeah,
thing.
Right.
So it has to be something that you can pull off
Well, if you're talking
because
about Brett as one of them, I don't know if it
I
worked
know, I
quite
know
yet, but you know.
that he was caught a little bit there, right?
Yeah.
So, but it has to be something that you can actually pull off. Now, interestingly enough, with Brett, he didn't actually have that backstory. He just made up a profession he thought nobody would want to talk to him about.
I thought that he
yeah,
And
did like know someone or work
well, but that's
side
different if
jobs
you
there
if
or
you know
something.
someone who does that
Yeah.
versus I've done it before,
Right.
because then it's kind of difficult to really fill
Mhm.
in the blanks if you've never done it before.
Right.
And
yeah,
so even though with Josh, yes, he could say he was a personal trainer and he looks like someone who could be a personal
Mhm.
trainer, but you are, I think, completely correct, Voce, when you say if there's nothing else that he can latch on to,
yeah,
because that's who he is, that's what his existence consists of, then yes, he's removing a huge
yeah,
part of himself from every conversation he's having.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I had this in the second rule as scheming and plotting too much, but
yeah,
it could also fall as bad scheming and plotting,
yeah,
because I mean, I think it was too much. I still would categorize it as too much. But yeah, I can totally see as bad and therefore not allowing him to scheme and plot properly.
yeah,
Um,
Right.
but I do want to wrap up the idol thing because he was trying to take heat off of himself,
By
and by
creating it.
right.
yeah,
And what's even funnier is that when he told the truth to Jamie, she hilariously was certain that it was a lie.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but here's the thing: I understand. Part of the reason, not just taking the heat off himself, he hoped the others wouldn't vote for him, or someone else who really did have an idol would want to exchange information. Now,
yeah,
I understand it was a Hail Mary, but neither of those outcomes were likely. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
if people thought he had an idol, the easiest solution is to do exactly what they did.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and why would anyone who actually did have an idol come talk to him after he got all this chatter going about his supposed idol? No, you
yeah,
Which
want to
was
stay as
either fake
far
or
away,
not
right?
fake. Yeah.
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 So,
Well,
it just, the other thing is the timing doesn't make sense because at least from what we saw, he brought it up right away before he even thought he needed the Hail Mary. So
Yeah.
the whole story just much like his idol kind of falls apart there.
but I think
Mhm.
what you were seeing was his scheme and plotting because if you remember when he was on his original tribe, he was going to be the vote out or what we were led to believe.
But
They
he didn't
wanted to
know
Mhm.
vote him out.
that.
He didn't know that, but I think like his whole scheming and plotting and I'm probably going into rule 2 of, like you were saying, scheming and plotting too much.
Mhm.
I think his scheming and plotting was getting him into trouble because, on his
Yes.
original tribe, they were like, he's cagey, he's going around, you know, he's everyone he had that persona of like, let's get him out. And I think
Mhm.
when he came back at the Mergatory and was starting to, I think he was falling into the same exact rut where he was scheming and plotting so much that people are like, no, let's just get him out because of, it was more of
Yeah.
the same. I don't think
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I just don't know why he brought up the idol when he did. I could understand it if he got there and heard that he was a target and then he brings it up.
Yeah.
But that was like he led with that.
Yeah.
When he
Well,
thought Sokka were still his allies, and there
and
was no
also
reason to do it then.
at like the merge, and when you're meeting new people, you're kind of testing the waters and kind of
Right.
laying low. You're not
Mhm.
being this like, all this aggressive,
Mhm.
um, uh, uh, talk about the idols,
Yeah.
and
You're
the
shining a
kind of.
light on yourself immediately, and you don't
Right.
want to do that.
Mhm.
You want to just
Yeah.
kind of sit back and watch everyone else shine a light on
Yeah.
themselves. You don't
Yeah.
want to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Now I do want to throw in one good thing here because he did try to bury the hatchet with Jam Jam by saying they should
Mhm.
vote Kane. I wasn't initially sure if he was being real about it, but he said in an interview that it was an actual attempt. But then he realized Jam Jam probably didn't trust him, and it just wasn't going to work with the way things were
I
going.
don't. I also think it was too little, too late.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
it was.
I think that it was,
Mm.
while he was. I mean, uh, while he was sitting on that beach, when they realized that they weren't going to tribal, I mean, he should have been mending the relationships instead of being like, "Get me off this island."
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, instead of that being the focus. I mean, it could have been like, "I hate it here, but I'm going to put up this image
Right.
of, no, I'm going to work with you. We're going to stay 3 strong. Whatever it is to kind of play that game." I think that's the scheming and plotting he should have done. Was
Yes.
been like,
Oh yeah.
hey, I know I was the one that was going to go home, but now that it's us 3, when we go to the Mergatory, let's stay 3 strong and have them, get them on our side as opposed to being like, no, I'm going to go with my people and screw you people.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Yeah. Now, he also said in interviews that another part of his plan to target Kane was to try to convince Carolyn that he wasn't with the Muscle Bros, because he said, Kane was like, a strong guy. But Kane is a nerd, not a muscle bro.
And he
So
wasn't talked about at that little
right,
luncheon.
right.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's a totally wrong read on Josh's part. And I
Mhm.
don't think it would have worked anyway. I know that Josh, in his interviews, attributed a lot of Carolyn's flip back to the behavior of Brandon and Danny. But I really feel like we saw that she was already leaning that way of going back to Jam Jam. And, Josh's janky fake idol and obvious lying just didn't help matters. I'm not sure there was anything he could have done to get her back on his side.
Right. And I think at that point, if you feel like the people that you've just come from an island with
Mhm.
aren't going to have your back, and
Mhm.
you think that the people you came from did have your back, those are the people that you really need to be
Right.
going to and rekindling that relationship. Instead, as he said, he wanted to create chaos, and he wasn't focusing on those things that really would have made sense for him at this point in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I do want to go back and give him one more prop here for helping nudge.
It's fine. You can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I know. Helping nudge Carolyn down this Sarah path to begin with, because he described to Mike Bloom how he woke her up so she could listen in on Jam Jam and Sarah
Mm-hmm.
having secret conversations that he said were about targeting her. And he took credit for planting the seed. The thing is, we already knew Carolyn wanted Sarah out since the start. So I'd say maybe he, watered the seedling. But it was good enough to help Carolyn for that one vote, but he had an idol anyway. So,
Yeah.
Now speaking of that idol, Josh confirmed the obvious in the interviews that he was always going to play it on himself.
Mm.
The funny thing to me is that last episode, he congratulated himself on his intuition and his gut to play the idol, even though he now agrees that that was obvious.
Mm. Yeah. Well,
So, yeah. All right. Well, we can go.
He's had a long time to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. We can go to the
Marinate
second
on
rule,
that.
although we've already, dipped our toes in. which is not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. We've already discussed a bit how Josh was often bad at scheming and plotting. And that bad part also, I think, if you're bad and you keep doing it, that's when you get into scheming and plotting too much. And I really think that was a big problem for him. With what you discussed. And also, he's just not a good liar, know. And in real life,
and he picks very odd things to focus those lies on.
Well, also we saw. Here's the thing. I feel like you try and minimize your lies, right?
Yes.
And he didn't.
Lie as little as possible.
Mhm.
You're gonna have to lie. You're gonna have to like agree into people's faces and then backstab and do all those things. But you want to try and minimize those lies, because no one is that good of a liar, and you can't keep your story straight. He was just lying about everything, and
even causing his own lies to be questioned with the explanations that he was given and his own commentary. I
mean, it's just the whole thing is confusing. I
mean, he, if you're not a good liar in real life, great. You hopefully don't need to be. But he wasn't, and he kept doing it, and he would get busted on the prior lies, but he'd respond by saying to a later lie by saying, I wouldn't lie to you, but they already knew you had lied to them. So it's like, it's, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, shame on you. Yeah, had it backwards. But still, the point is, and that gets to, what we had already discussed somewhat, him lying about his job, because he messed it up so badly. He slipped doing other things. This is one thing you were saying, Voce, when, that you can't slip. I mean, if you're not telling people you're a surgeon, you can't say, I need good manual dexterity for my job.
Right.
Because that doesn't make sense.
Lifting weights.
So that led Sarah to questioning him. He has scars on his body. He has a tattoo representing the stuff that he's been through. I mean, he needed to have explanations for all of this, and he was going to lie about it. But it was just, he went every which way but the right direction with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Agreed.
And then on top of that, we had what happened at Soka, which was, Matt noted in this episode that even back then they were trying to get rid of him. And we've talked about that. And it was because nobody trusted him. And, Franny, back before the Claire vote, was trying to get him voted out because he was suspicious. And we saw so little of that tribe that we really didn't see it, other than, seeing the Matt and Franny romance. That's obviously the, what we needed to see on that tribe before a vote, was, Josh told Mike Bloom he was close to Matt and Franny then, in part because he worried about Franny's knowledge of the game. And at the same time, he was talking to Danny a lot. So he believed he was in the middle, kind of the swing vote, but now he looks back and realizes that wasn't actually the case. I figure that at some point they all talked and realized what he was doing.
Yeah, and I feel like he reads people incorrectly. I mean, this is Survivor, right? And so what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to talk to everybody on your tribe to try to get to know them. And I just think that he read that wrong. It's not, you're not going into a tribe with the expectation I'm going to find my best friend, but I am going to try to get to know everyone. It's not like when you're starting like in a new classroom or a new school where you're like, I need to find my best friend and I need to see who I'm going to click with. You want to click with everyone, or at least act like you click with everyone, and everyone's going to do the same back, right?
Right.
Yeah, I also think that, I think that this goes back to him lying about his background, but I think that he's someone that's very proud of his path that he's had.
Yes.
Yes.
You know,
Oh,
where,
yes.
you know, he's, I mean, obviously gone through so much adversity with his health conditions and then putting himself through school and, you know, now, you know, being out and done and being a podiatrist. He's like very, very proud in that. And like, I think that he's very confident because of what he's done. And I think that that confidence somehow conveyed wrong
Yes.
to people, because I think that people were kind of off put by it.
Yeah, because if they don't know where it's actually coming from,
Yeah,
like I think his
exactly. Yeah.
backstory would have supported that if he said, "This is what I've been through, and
Yeah.
this has made me who I am." I
Yeah.
think that people would have respected that confidence
Right.
as opposed to questioning the situation because
Yeah.
it wasn't making sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have all of that going on, and then he does stuff like the fake idol, you know, which makes it even worse. And the thing is, he even acknowledged it. He said in an interview that as soon as he did it, he knew he was in trouble, telling himself, "What am I doing? You're so scatterbrained and you forget what you've done and what you haven't done." And like you said, Voce, you can't lie and then lose your place.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and so again, this comes back to the confusing timing of when he brought it up, why he would want to cause drama and chaos. And he did mention in interviews he knew Carolyn would spill about the fake once she was in the safe group. But again, that was later. That was like a day and a half later.
Yeah.
So again, that just doesn't make sense. And on top of that, it wasn't even the idol that was the only way he was trying to move the target and over scheming. As soon as they hit the Mergatory Beach, he started pushing the narrative that he wanted Carolyn and Jam Jam gone.
Yeah.
And to the point that he was like poking the Jam Jam bear, publicly
Yeah.
talking about the Sarah vote and how Jam Jam was targeting him. And, you know, like Jam Jam said, he held a grudge too hard and acted like it was a betrayal. But they were never on the same side. So it wasn't. And it just drew more attention to Josh himself.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that when you're, especially if your name is out there, right? And I know it's, you want to try and scramble, but I feel like he was almost shooting himself more in the foot, being like, no, I want it to be this person, this person, this person, as opposed to being like, who are we going to vote for? You know,
Yeah.
as opposed to like maybe not trying to be this stubborn driving force to try and figure out, you know, jam, 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 jam.
Right.
As opposed to being like, what do other people want? Because clearly I'm in a dangerous situation right now. So how do I just latch on and go with, you know, whoever at this point? Because if I don't, it's gonna be my name. So I need some way to survive. And clearly he did not have troops on his side. And then we saw him trying to drive this narrative of let's get Jam Jam.
Well, yeah, and that leads directly into, or maybe already steps into, the third rule, which is about being flexible.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you what you thought about his flexibility, but I think you just answered.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you not flexible. And I mean,
Yeah.
he changed. I think at one point he was like, "No, I'll vote for what was Kane."
So
the one,
yeah,
at
so
one
what
point, I
happened
think he
was
said,
Franny came to him and
Yeah.
said, "What about Kane?" And
Yeah.
he said yes, but he couldn't even leave it at that. He said yes or Jam Jam.
Yeah.
Even
He
then,
couldn't let the Jam Jam name alone.
right.
Yeah.
He just had to throw it back into the mix.
Yeah. I think, and we already talked about this, the being flexible part. He never considered working with Jam Jam or Carolyn. You know, he never fit.
Right.
You know, he just was like, I am at war. I need to get off this island so I can get back with my original people. And he never considered, you know, yes, we were battling Jam Jam, but maybe we can work together now. That was not. He was like, nope, it's dead. You know,
Yeah.
and it's like you're literally on an island of 3 people. Like,
Yeah.
you know that the merge is coming. So repair and be like, well, let's do this. Like,
Yeah.
set aside, I'm with you guys, let's go. Even if he thought he had his old tribe, I'll get my old tribe and we'll take out the third tribe. You know,
Right.
even if that's not sincere, you know, even if he was going to go against him, like, just try and get them to be on your side. Like, be flexible and be like, let me use you guys as numbers.
Yeah. And it certainly, in that type of situation, when you are only 3 people and you are directly like battling it out with one of those 3 people, and then you're bringing that into another group. I mean, what better thing for the people at the merge to hear? But there's a couple of people that are already at each other, great. Let's fuel that fire. Let's keep that going, because now we don't have to worry about dropping a name, because Josh and Jam Jam don't like each other and they're not getting along. And so it certainly doesn't help anyone in that situation, because you don't want to be, again, we've said it before, like, you're just looking, you need an excuse, you need a reason to name drop, right? And if you're giving people a reason, then of course they're going to grab onto it, and of course they're going to tell other people this is what's happening, because then they're not saying your name, they're saying Jam Jam and Josh.
Yeah. And this fixation that he had on Jam Jam at least partially leads us into the fourth rule too, because that tells players not to let their emotions control them. Josh made this easy for us by admitting he played emotionally and wanted Jam Jam out as a personal vendetta. And he said it again and again in interviews too. He said he wanted to play with Jam Jam originally, and when Jam Jam didn't return the feeling, it hurt him to the point that he figured Jam Jam had to go. Now, I could understand the feeling of hurt that someone who had so much in common with him didn't want to work with him. But that's something you have to put aside. You have to put all of your emotions aside, as Carolyn told us in that scene, when it comes to making strategic decisions. Jam Jam was already in an alliance or two when Josh showed up. He wasn't just going to drop everything and flip to a guy he had just met, even if they did seem to have a lot of similarities. And you can't take something like that personally. I mean, I guess you could take it personally all you want, as long as you don't let it affect your game at the same time.
Right. Yeah. The vendetta component of it is certainly problematic this early in the game. And if you have a vendetta, there are different ways to approach it and go about handling it. And the way that Josh did is not the correct way to handle it, because you can get to Jam Jam later, but in order to get to Jam Jam, you have to rally the troops. And the way that he was trying to do that certainly wasn't going to bring out about an end to Jam Jam. It was only going to be causing the target to come back on Josh.
Yeah. All right, we can move to the fifth rule, which reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. In this episode, Franny said twice that Josh had an amazing social game. But in a prior episode, the whole tribe talked about how he thought he had them all fooled, but they saw through it. So how exactly did he have a great social game? I think the answer goes back to what we discussed a bit previously, which is that basically different people on Soka felt used by Josh. If they all felt good about him individually, but then they compared notes and realized that could be exactly why they said he had a good social game, because he got himself into those positions initially. It's just that they eventually figured him out.
Yeah,
I think they're confusing. I think they're confusing what a good social game is, though.
Well, that could be too.
I think he was sociable in a sense that he would have conversations. But I think like having a good social game is being able to kind of socially integrate yourself into these situations and be like on the same page as other people. And again, I think this goes back to his background and him being proud of his past, where I don't think that he was relatable. And so I think he seems like a very charismatic, very confident person who people would gravitate to, but I'm not sure if he had that relatability. That's what you want when you're suffering out on the island together. You want to be able to relate to people, and to be able to, once you have that relatability, that's when you start having conversations about, I want to work with you.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were talking about, Claire's interview. That he was aloof about his personal life, which made it hard to connect, and also made them think he was hiding something, which he was. And as she also said, he wasn't doing himself a ton of favors. And so this goes back to what we discussed earlier about hiding so much of your backstory. And it's I'm going to repeat some of what you said, but it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to pretend to have a different job that I used to have, and so when I currently have, it's quite another to say, I'm going to hide over a decade of my life and pretend I was doing other things. And I'm hiding my job, and I'm hiding all the huge and important challenges I've faced in my life. And I don't know how you could play a game like Survivor while hiding that much of yourself.
Yeah.
And then in his case, it was literally written on his body, again, with those scars and tattoo.
Right.
And he didn't want to talk about any of that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's no wonder he didn't want to talk about it, since we saw he was bad at lying. But still, he should have taken that all into account.
Yeah. And I do think that the sociable component is a great point, because I think he really thought it was almost like a checklist. Like, okay, I talked to that person today. Done. Oh, okay, I talked to that person. I'm done. I feel like that was the way he was approaching it. It's like, as long as I have a conversation with that person, well, then I'm going to be in their good graces, and I will be fine because I'm actually communicating with them, as opposed to actually getting to know this person and sharing and having a connection and strategizing. It was like, I will at least speak to this person. And then, that's kind of where it ended for him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Josh did and Jam did share their very personal coming out stories before they turned on each other again. And I really do think if Josh had been as open with everyone about the rest of his life as he was in that moment with Jam, his Survivor story might have had a very different ending.
Yes.
I agree.
So, all right. Well, the sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. And I mentioned earlier that Josh had said, both in his final words and then in interviews, that he was targeted because he was a threat. And I will acknowledge that Matt and Franny
did we skip a rule?
No.
No.
Nope.
Am I confused?
Maybe. Look at your poster.
I'm confused.
Rule 6.
Look at my shirt.
Rule 6. Interesting. Okay, I can count.
What did you think we missed?
Proceed.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
That's embarrassing.
It's a good thing Tiffany isn't here to make fun of you.
I know. Oh, please. She doesn't know what one of the rules is.
I know, but still.
I don't think
she would still make fun of you.
Yeah.
She
would. She
would.
would.
Rule 1, make fun of Voce.
She's going to come up with her own list of rules, and then it will be one.
Yeah. So, I was saying that I acknowledge that Matt and Franny called him a threat because of his social game too, And then when Jamie was informing some of the others when she returned from lunch, she said they were pretty unanimous on Josh being the biggest threat. And in the moment, it didn't make much sense. And there were a number of people on Twitter, including former players like Hi and James, wondering how he could be a threat when they were going to vote him out if he hadn't swapped away from Soka. I think it just goes back to what we were discussing last rule and in the second rule, and that, their idea of what a threat is, well, they believed he was trying to play them all when he was originally on Soka. So while they figured him out, they wouldn't want him to try to pull that trick again in a new merge tribe. So I think that's why they were suggesting he was a threat to try to pull that, even though they had busted him trying to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he certainly said the term threat on repeat in his interviews. Many times. So he certainly felt like he was. And this is something that we've talked about too, that being a threat can come in so many variations, and it depends on the circumstance. And so, yes, what you're explaining could certainly be perceived as a threat to those individual players, knowing what they know about him. And that makes him a threat because he's cagey. There's things that we don't really know is going on. And so we're questioning him, and that can feel unsafe, and that can feel threatening because we don't really know what he's up to. And now he's trying to create all this chaos, which is also potentially threatening. And so I think that that's probably where that came from. So it's just a different type of threat, and it's more of a threat to their individual games as opposed to, well, he's a threat to maybe win because he's so good at the game. It's more of like, how is he going to mess up my game because of something that he's doing that we're questioning and don't understand?
Right.
I think a couple of things. I think when he, in all of his interviews, like you said, it was just on repeat. I was seen as a threat. And I think a lot of this is, you want to be remembered as you want to have a good narrative
Yeah.
for yourself. So I think it's one of those
Sure.
things where if you say it enough, then it's like, oh, he must have been a big threat.
And
But I
we've
think the
seen
other
that
thing,
before, certainly. You know, people come out and say, I was
You've
voted
had
out because I was a threat. And we're like, no, you weren't.
no,
But
but I think very much this goes back into the self-awareness category in terms of I think he really thought that he was a big threat because of his past, because of what he's been through, because of his confidence, because of what he's achieved and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't know about that. And
Right.
so, I think he's like, I'm this huge threat. And it's like, the muscle group didn't want him or didn't really consider him a part of it. His original tribe didn't really consider him a part of the tribe. And so I think he was kind of on this island where he was not in tune with what other people were thinking about. And I think
Right.
this is just another example of that because I don't think he was too much of a threat. I think that it was his other parts of his game that actually ended up tanking him.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, at least two of the guys in the muscle group did mention him to Carolyn.
Yeah.
But he, in his interviews, expanded talking about his own physical prowess, for example. But looking at that, I mean, yeah, he seemed physically strong. He did well in other challenge
Yeah.
aspects too. But when you look at him compared to like Danny and Brandon, I
Yeah.
don't think that he was particularly standing out in the muscle category.
Right. Right.
So, but getting back to what you were saying, Voce, his backstory, I mean, part of the reason he said he lied about it was because he didn't want to make himself more of a threat. He didn't want to talk about being a surgeon because it makes you seem smart and pushy and like you don't need money. Now, Voce, we already know you're smart and you showed it on Survivor. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, 16.6666.
Okay, that is a pretty common.
I know.
Go on.
But what do you think as a surgeon about Josh trying to hide being a surgeon to reduce his threat level? Are surgeons perceived as smart and pushy and rich?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, no. But so here's the thing, because I thought about this. I like I said, I thought about lying about my profession and everything. But I think that what I was concerned about was that if you're sitting there at Final Tribal Council and there are, two people that, work their butts off to get their schemes and plotted, are they going to give it to someone that they perceive as, they're a surgeon, they're on a good career path, they're going to be set for life? And I think that's a great concern. But at the same time, you have to get there. You have to get to Final Tribal Council. And you've got to be able to build relationships. And I think that that's way more important. And again, I do think that there's, for someone, especially with him, where he's just out of residency or whatever, where his life has been about this, he doesn't have other things to really connect with and to explain what this big void in his life has been for.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what was misjudged. And I think people really latched onto that and saw, something's not right.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting you brought up Final Tribal Council, because he actually said in one of his interviews that he wanted to utilize Final Tribal Council to have this big aha moment. Like, I actually am a survivor of all of these struggles and these health issues that I've gone through in my life, which is incredible. But at that moment, you have to really decide, are they going to look at it and go, oh, that's amazing? Or are they going to say, well, you've been lying to us the whole time about everything?
Yeah.
So that is a tricky game to play as well. Like, if you make it to the final tribal and then have this big reveal, how is that going to be perceived?
But I think that's also, I think for future players that are going to go out there, I think that's having a very TV minded aspect of Final Tribal Council. Most people go into Final Tribal Council already knowing what they're going to do. And also it's based on the relationships that you've built. And so if you've built relationships being on like, look, this is what I've gone through, right? People will know that you've gone through that. You don't need to hear like at Final Tribal, like, oh, these are all the things that I've done and have been through. It's kind of like, wait, so then do I even know who you are and everything? Like it's not like this, like Final Tribal is this like, who am I going to vote for type of situation. It's people go in already knowing what they're going to do for the most part. That
Mhm.
sure, that's not universal, but by and large, that's what it is. And
Yeah.
so use those things to build your relationships and build those, blocks throughout so that, when you get there to the final travel, if you're that lucky person, that you can actually, be like, yeah, these are the things that we connected over. And
Yeah.
not be like, actually, everything that I said was a lie. And, if you're going to lie, I would lie through tribal council. I mean,
Yeah.
lie through the final tribal and then reveal once it's done. Because
I
it's
mean,
like,
yeah,
you want to,
he wanted the aha moment. Like, you guys didn't know
yeah,
that to get here, I had to
yeah,
survive stomach cancer, a kidney transplant, all these other
yeah.
chronic conditions. And I did this and that. And I mean, yeah, I'm sure
And
it would have been impressive, but
what, so,
I
so
think
here,
you
here,
said the key thing. You've got to get there first.
Mhm.
yeah, and the other
Yeah.
thing is that, like, it's impressive, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's super impressive what he's been through, and he's an impressive person for what he's done. But
Mhm.
are you trying to be impressive? Like, is
Right.
that
Right.
your goal? You're not. That's not the goal of Survivor. The goal of Survivor is to build these relationships with people so that they vote for you at the end. It's
Mm-hmm.
not to have
Mhm.
people be like, "Oh, I'm so impressed by you."
Right,
And
exactly.
but
They want to be
I feel
impressed
like
with
we're
your game, not
yes,
you and the life that you had.
Yeah. And
It's about the
even,
game.
yeah,
yeah,
even on like the most recent season of Australian Survivor that just finished up, and I won't spoil
Don't
anything.
spoil it.
I know. But like on the jury, one of the people on the final tribal council said, was talking about how he overcame a bunch of things to get there. And then a couple of the jurors were like, well, do you know you've said this about us. Do you know any of my hobbies? Do you know what I
Mm,
like to do?
yeah,
Do you know, you say we only talked about these things and therefore you weren't involved, but you never approached me with anything. I know your hobbies. Why don't you know my hobbies?
right.
hmm
And so there were other things going on with that particular jury, but, um, or those people complaining about that aspect. But yeah, I mean, it's something we've seen before. I
yeah,
don't know that I consider it necessarily a legitimate line of questioning, like, tell me my kids' names, tell me
Yeah.
my husband's birthday, and we've
yeah,
seen stuff like that before. I don't know that that's
Mhm.
playing Survivor, but if you're playing with people who do consider it important, then you got to
yeah,
cater to it. And
Yeah.
hiding a third of your life, you
yeah,
know, you just can't do that.
yeah.
I
And
think
that
that's
was,
still I think was that Jenna Lewis that was like knew everything or no, it wasn't. It
No,
wasn't
that
Jenna.
was
it was
Heidi. It was an
It
Amazon, right? Wasn't it Amazon?
no,
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 it
no,
was
no, no. I'm
someone, no, it
now
was,
I'm back in Borneo. Back in Borneo.
yeah, it
It
was
was
Kelly
Kelly.
telling Jenna, I know the
oh,
names of your daughters and I know this and I know that. Yeah.
And it
yeah,
was like it was rather impressive because she really
Yeah.
did know everything about everyone. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
We got there full circle.
yes, yes. All right. So we can move to Appendix A, which is about the tribe keeping their end goals in mind. And of course, we talk about voting out the weak and the strong and the weak and the strong. Now, all of this is somewhat up in the air at Mergatory. But the end, it really did come down to long-term planning. Nobody on Soka trusted Josh, and they all voted against it. That's a pretty big block of people going against someone in a situation like this. And the other players had to be looking at this and saying, if these four people who played with him for all this time wanted him gone, there must be a pretty
Mm-hmm.
good reason for it.
Yeah.
And then
yeah,
you have the two other people who he swapped to, adding more fuel to the fire with their stories about him not being trustworthy.
And then him
So,
adding his own fuel to the
right,
fire.
yeah,
right. So, why would anyone want to work with someone like this long term when
Mm-hmm.
they didn't know that he could be trusted? It just
Yeah.
yeah,
made the most sense for pretty much everyone. Jessica, like you were saying, a threat to their individual game. It doesn't help
Mm-hmm.
their long-term
yeah,
game
Right.
to work with him. So I honestly, I think even those who voted for Jam Jam knew it was a backup plan in case
yeah.
Josh, really did have an idol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I agree with you. That was a
okay.
great assessment.
All right. Thank you.
You sound so enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's like there's sometimes like there's things to be added, and then other times
Yeah,
like, no, that's about it. You
Oh,
just
okay.
wrapped it
Yeah.
right up.
yeah,
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Good. All right. Well, speaking of wrapping things up, it is about that time because, we did. I should have said this before we dealt with Appendix A, but we had talked about Rule 7 in 1 and 2, and really throughout almost all the rules. So Voce, what are your final thoughts?
So my final thoughts would be this. I think Josh is a very impressive guy. His past is impressive. His career path is impressive. Like what he's done, what he's overcome. His one-on-one confessional or interaction with Jam Jam. We saw some raw moments from him. We saw this huge potential for what he could have been. He, in his interview with for Parade, he said with Jam it was more of a personal vendetta and I felt heartbroken. I play emotionally, and I think that kind of underlines this kind of how he came in and played. Like he let emotions control him. He came in and he had this self-inflated idea of who he was based on his past, which is impressive, but he didn't let people connect with that. And I think that he had this idea of how he was going to play. He ended up playing emotionally. He ended up playing cagey. He ended up not relating to people. And I think ultimately no one really trusted him. And people were like, we don't know what to do with this. And I really think that that's what his downfall was. I think you could go into and say he schemed and plotted, too much and all that. But at the end of the day, I really think that it was his lack of ability to connect with people, on his original tribe and on the Tika tribe when it got down to small, that really cost him the game. And I think the reason why he was around for so long was because, his original tribe didn't go to tribal council, and because of, the swap with the medevac and everything. And so I think that he's very, lucky, which a lot of Survivor is, to have made it as far as he had, because like everyone was saying, he had, how many lives does he have?
Yes, for sure.
So Jessica?
Well, I think if you were to ask Josh, he would probably say something like, I'm a threat, 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 right? I mean, we saw a lot of that. And we talked about various
Dora
versions
the
of threats.
Explorer.
It is. Yeah. It's the I'm a map.
I'm a map, yeah.
But he's a threat.
Yeah.
And I have to agree with Voce. Yes. Josh had such an impressive backstory and life. And that is who has created this person he now is, right? All of those things created who he now is. And to remove that from yourself, from himself, when he's meeting people, when he's trying to get to know people, it's like, what do you grab onto if you can't grab onto 85% of who you are because you want to keep that a secret? I do truly believe he didn't really understand the nuanced way that Survivor works. And it is based on those social relationships, and it is based on those connections that you can create with people. And if everyone who you are talking to is questioning you when you talk to them, like he's hiding something, you are never going to get to that true connection that you need in order to then get to the final three and have a group of people sitting in front of you that all say, I really like this guy, and he played one hell of a game. You instead are going to have people going, what did you like? What are you hiding? They aren't going to appreciate your game because they're going to be questioning it the entire time. So I do think that Josh could have brought so much more of himself to the game that probably would have elevated him and caused him to go so much further, because then he truly would have been himself. And that moment that we saw with Jam Jam, there would have been so many more of those if he had been willing to let that part of himself be seen.
Yeah.
So I really do think that that decision for Josh was not a great one, because he didn't know how to actually then be something else that people would still want to relate to and understand.
Yeah. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, Josh seems to be a very nice guy outside the game. And, we've talked about, he's overcome so much in real life, but he's also probably a guy who doesn't lie very much and doesn't seem to have been prepared for how much he would have to do that on Survivor. And then he made things even worse by choosing to lie about so much of his life. And this had multiple negative effects on his game. It made him seem suspicious to everyone he met, with good reason, because he was in fact hiding things. It made him stand out as a liar, with good reason because he was in fact lying. And then when he lied about other game-related things like his fake idol, he stood out even more and couldn't claim the high ground when he said things like, I wouldn't lie. Beyond all of that, he could never truly be himself. The true nice guy inside of him had to stay hidden. The guy who accomplished so much, overcame so many things, he couldn't come out. It wasn't just the bad lies that were problematic, it was the lack of truth. Even when Josh did manage to get close to a few people socially, the other suspicions surrounding him and his behavior ended up making them think it was all game, all him being cagey. And while some of it certainly was, it turned whatever social game he might have had into him being a supposed threat. When you have been on 2 tribes by mergatory vote, and all the people who knew you, except one who was seemingly out of the loop, vote you out, there was obviously a problem in how those people perceived you. Josh was seen as a threat because others looked at what he had said and done and took all of it as pure gameplay, I think. Some of it certainly was, but by forcing himself to lie more than was necessary, I think the term cagey that was used by some tribe mates was appropriate in more ways than one because he caged up the real Josh inside of him. And that is why Josh lost.
Look at that. And we have a bird cage.
Ta-da.
I know. I thought of that every time. I'm like, how can I weave in the bird cage? No, I'm not going to.
You have a bird cage? What?
No,
Where's the bird cage?
On the show,
On
the
the show,
bird cage.
Oh, I thought you said Bloomberg had him.
No.
No. There's all of the bird cages all over the islands. Now,
Yes.
you know what I haven't mentioned yet on the podcast, and I just want to do it here because why the hell not? The bird cage. Why hasn't anyone moved the damn thing? Or why didn't anybody move it? Like move it like into the middle of camp. Pick it up and move it. I'm sure
My
it's not
guess
bolted
is
to the ground.
just as they were told they couldn't bash it open or pry it open, they were probably told they couldn't move it either.
Yeah, because I would have been like, I'm picking this up and it's coming
Yeah.
right over. So where everybody can look at it all the time. Yeah. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
So, all right. Well, before we get to our predictions, let me remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in poster form and t-shirt form and a checklist form at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Go there and scroll to your heart's content, or better yet, click to your heart's content. Also, people should know that they can get a hold of us in various different ways.
Yes. So you can follow myself on Twitter at Jessica Lewis 89. You can follow David Bloomberg at David Bloomberg. And Voce, you're not on Twitter, right? You just do Instagram. Yes. So you can follow David Voce on Instagram at David J. Voce. And I also am on Instagram at Jessica Lewis 6789. But David Bloomberg is in so many places and such an influencer that he has a linked tree that lists everything that you can find.
What is a link tree?
Oh,
This
he'll
is
tell
a link
you.
tree.
Oh, here we go. Are you
Oh
ready?
no! Oh no!
That is
Oh
a link
no!
tree.
Good Lord! What?
You walked into that
you
one,
serious?
Voce.
You
So
can't
you
even
go-
read it. They're so small.
I know on this you can't read it. It's very small. I tried to figure out how to
But there's
enlarge
so
it,
many things there.
But yes, you go
Oh
to
my goodness.
linktree/David Bloomberg, except there's a dot before the EE. So it's linktree.
There's a picture of me on it.
There is. You saw that.
Oh
Yes,
my goodness!
Right there. Right there. I'm pointing to it and you can't see it. But yes,
my goodness.
I told you that before I put it there. Where on the
Uh-huh.
get a Rules of Survivor poster, there is a picture of Voce.
I love that Voce has made your linked tree page.
Linktree, yes.
See?
Yes.
Oh, linked tree.
No, Linktree. No ED.
Link tree. Okay, whatever.
Linktree.
Just link tree. I don't want to mess
Yes.
up where people can find you.
Linktree/David Bloomberg, again, a dot before the EE. And so, yes. And then, of course, you guys were mentioning Instagram. I am at Instagram and TikTok and YouTube at David Bloomberg TV.
So many places. And this
so many
guy with his TikToks, so many.
So many, yes. I mean,
so many TikToks.
We
so little
got a
time.
lot out of Cassidy last week. I gotta say, between us trying to
I
give
was gonna say I
high
needed more. I either needed more wine or I needed Tiffany. One
Yeah.
of those two. One
Yeah.
of
Oh,
those
we
two.
need to
And
do that again. We definitely
mean,
need to do that again.
I will say, so you had a big moment for me on TikTok when you talked about the Survivor Fairness Judge.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
You were
Mhm.
like one of the first people to talk about that, and it went pretty big on my TikTok. Now, more recently, I have heard a number of other Survivor players talking about it. As a matter of fact, Karishma talked about it on the recap podcast just
Oh, really?
this week. And somewhere, I can't remember who else talked about it recently, but I'm like, yes, Voce talked about that. They're saying the same. Oh, Claire.
Mhm.
Claire talked about it
Yeah.
in interviews.
Like
because,
Voce did it first on
Yeah.
our podcast.
I'm the OG.
Yeah,
You
OG.
are.
because when Brandon went down at that challenge and they gave him water, Claire was on the sidelines going, "Hey, fairness person, doesn't everybody get water now?" So they had to stop and give water to everybody because they gave it to
That's
Brandon.
amazing. Yeah.
Didn't
So
you also get an IV?
yeah.
I know.
So
like IVs for everyone.
Yeah.
That would be an
Come on.
amazing picture.
Yeah.
All 18 survivors with IVs in their arms.
And she mentioned also the same thing you had mentioned in that previous time when you were on, which was if one tribe is in the shade, they all have to be in the shade and stuff like that. So yeah, you were a trendsetter in discussing that. I have to
Look
say
at that. Look at you,
Mhm.
Voce.
So
Well, no, I think people, honestly, they should do a like behind the scenes, like a 30-minute episode or something
Oh
of
my
Survivor
gosh,
behind
they
the scenes.
should.
I mean, it's for anyone, even non-Survivor fans would be fascinated about
Uh-huh.
you walk into a challenge and there's a bleacher set up with 300 people watching
Yes.
you like a stadium,
Yeah.
to your one side, and then cameras are on that side. And then,
And they don't prepare you for any of that because it's
Mm-mm.
like that moment when you're coming in on the boat and you look up and you're like, oh my God, what is
Yeah.
There's a
happening?
lot of
There's
people.
so many cameras and so many people.
they showed it at
It's-
the beginning of 41.
Yeah.
When they came back.
Yeah.
But other than that,
to
normally
an
you don't see it.
extent, though. But I mean, the challenges are different because the
Mhm.
challenges are
Right.
there's literally. I mean, I remember even being at after I got voted out at Ponderosa and the pre-jury Ponderosa, and some of the handlers and staff that were at
Mhm.
Ponderosa watching us. They were like, all right, well, we have tickets to the challenge. We're like, what do you mean tickets to the challenge? It's like certain number of people. And they would literally get on the boat like 2 hours to go and just be spectators at
It's
the challenge.
amazing.
Could they
playing.
have
And then
scalped
they would
them
come
to
back.
you or something? Could you have been
I
like,
know,
I'm
right?
trading you 2 shells for this, or
It's like, is that allowed? So
No, it is. It's amazing when you end up finally becoming like comfortable with that, because when you first see it, it's
Yeah.
very shocking. And then you just kind of accept the fact that there are all of these people watching you all of the
Yeah.
time. So much so, like before one of the challenges, I literally peed like in front of everybody because I was like, I'm gonna go right there. I'm just gonna walk, it's just right there because they like freaked out that I needed to go pee and like, where am I gonna go? I gotta talk to a producer. I was like, I'm taking 2
Push
steps back.
me now.
Like,
Yeah.
it's fine. Like, I don't care
Yeah.
right now. I'm disgusting. This is what we're doing. But it would be a fascinating thing for anyone to see what
Yeah.
goes into actually producing each of these episodes. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I'm actually surprised that Jeff, because Jeff on his podcast talks about these production things. I'm actually surprised he hasn't gotten to the whole fairness of it all. I mean, maybe he feels like it would sound like too much of a try hard, like, oh no, I'm really trying to tell you how fair it is. Or maybe he just, I mean, maybe if he does the podcast for another year or two, he'll get to that point. But
right.
it just is interesting. Like I said, I think that's one thing that attracted so many people was like, oh my gosh, we've never heard about this fairness judge before.
Yeah.
So
well, it's a similar thing. Carolyn had that great reaction when she walked into the voting booth for the first time. And it was like so many pieces and all that.
Right.
But when you walk into like the voting booth, something that people don't see is there's like 10 people huddled around the camera that you're looking into, and it's like, who the hell are all you people? And it's like you're holding it up and they're like, hold sign up here, and it's like, what in the world? It's little things like that I think just would make people appreciate just the absurdity of what we're doing.
what's so weird too is when you're like voting and there's people in the voting booth, so like with the camera watching you. Then when it's the like final tribal for the winner, I walked in and there was nobody there. There was just literally a camera, and I was like, it's like, wait a second, where are the people? Like, there's supposed to be somebody.
That was when they kept it a secret, you know.
Yeah,
so
and
only,
so it was like
only Jeff could know, and the
so like
producer.
there's just a big camera sitting there staring at you. It is really, really fascinating. And even when you're at tribal council and you're looking across, like there's cameras over there, and Jeff is right there. I mean, it is absolutely amazing how they put all of this together. And Jeff really is, as much as we want to complain about some of the choices that have been made for Survivor, that man is a machine. I don't know how he does it. He doesn't forget things. He doesn't blow up anyone's game by mistake. And I will never forget, they had to change a reel in the middle of tribal council. And all of a sudden Jeff was like, okay, hold up. And it was like silent. And everybody waited, changed the reel. They walked away. And he went right back to where he was before, like without missing a beat. And you're just like, what just happened? Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So are you going to go into something like Cassidy did about how you love him but have complicated feelings for him?
Listen, that man, I would say some things that are very inappropriate, because I know we got, it's an hour and 35 minutes in, but I'll tell you a funny little story. I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before. I apologize if I have and you've heard it, but
I'll just eat this other peep in the meantime.
Eat your peep. So when we were at Ponderosa before the game started, right? And it's when they're kind of like telling you, like, get your little Survivor school thing and all of that stuff. And Jeff finally like comes in on a helicopter, and you get to meet Jeff, and it's a big deal. And you're like dying because you're like, oh, there's Jeff. And so we were all there. We're not talking to anyone, because you're not allowed to talk to anyone. Like, you can't talk to the other castmates and whatnot. And Jeff is just tooling around, like he's walking around. And I was in the pool, and there was a few other people around the pool. And Jeff walks over and starts having a conversation with me. And I was like, what was happening? And then all of a sudden he goes, I'm not supposed to be talking to you. And he walks away. And I was like, damn it. Like, it was so surreal, because you're like, I have been here silent for so many days because we're not allowed to talk to anyone. And then Jeff Probst is like, so, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, I don't even know what's happening right now. And then he realized he was breaking his own rules and, stopped. But anyway, he's very fun.
He had to pretend not to know you. So at the opening, he could say,
what's your name?
Woman in the back with the, I
always find that very funny.
Yes.
Heather from my season, we were sitting in pregame, and Jeff got ushered in by the Fijian military. A whole nother story. And he gives his little opening spiel, and then the military escorts him out by himself. And Heather, no one has said anything, Heather just goes, oh, he's sexy. And it's like everyone was just like, what in the world? Heather, of all people, like, what are you doing? But it was like the most genuine, like, just like slurp. And she's like, oops, I'm not supposed to talk. She's like, that may have been the bad first impression to have on people.
Amazing. I love this. Yeah. Yeah. No,
All
Jeff
right.
is, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've tried to put it off for you, Jessica, but it is time for predictions. And I don't know what I'm going to do, because
I'm
I
just
can't
going to
predict
put
Josh
this out
this
there
time.
too.
Huh?
It's my Jeff candle.
Goodness. That's amazing. That's amazing.
I'm bummed I didn't show this to Cassidy.
Yeah. How could you not?
I know. She
Wait,
needs a Jeff candle.
Does Cassidy have a crush on him?
Oh, you watch Bloomberg's TikTok and you'll see.
Oh,
yes.
no.
Or it's on Instagram too. You should be able to see it there.
Instagram.
Okay,
so predictions. Yeah, I'm terrible at predictions, as everyone knows, even though Josh, we were right at. Now, here's the thing I'm thinking.
Oh, good. You're going first. Okay.
What does it matter, right?
Yeah,
I've been here.
I want to hear this.
Brandon.
Well, bleep, 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 bleep. That's the same as me.
Why do you think Brandon?
Well, why did I pick Brandon? Okay, because he got a lot of time this past episode, right? There was all of the, I mean, Josh and talking to him and all that, but I think Brandon he's in this mindset where it's not understanding Survivor completely with what we've seen of his gameplay thus far. And this whole like bro thing, like although Danny was involved in that conversation, I feel like Danny understands Survivor better than Brandon. And I feel like Brandon is really going to kind of hitch his wagon to this bro idea. And you have enough people in this cast that are not going to like the bro idea. And we've already heard that expressed by various individuals. And I just feel like he's going to find himself on the outs because that's going to be really the emphasis that I think he's going to be focusing on. And so I feel like Brandon is going to find himself in a bad place. And also, he's like the strongest guy out there, right? So individual immunity challenges might be an issue at this point, and they might be looking at that as well. I mean, he basically picked up that massive ball by himself.
Yeah.
Dude is strong. So that's my choice. Is it yours?
Well, yeah, because so yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, I wrote
Can I
out
just
all
say,
the
look at Voce's lighting right now. He looks like you are straight out of a movie scene right
a
now. Look at
noir movie or something like
that.
that.
Little shadow over there.
Yes,
Oh
yes.
my gosh.
Yes. Welcome to Masterpiece Theater. So
Where's my pipe?
yeah. So at first I was thinking I could go back to my other standard prediction, which was Kane, because we did see his name come up. But or we could look to Jam Jam because he was the backup, and obviously being the backup, never a good thing.
Right.
But I just am not seeing it for either of them. It's not going to be easy for Jam Jam in particular to fade into the background, but I think others will move into the foreground.
Yes.
Kind of like, the opposite of the old thing. They show the guys in the army and they say, take one step forward if you volunteer, and everybody else takes one step backwards. This will actually be people moving forward. And so I also think that we saw the re-cementing of the original Tika alliance, and Carson will probably pull in Kane. And as much as Soka stuck together for this vote, I don't know that they're going to continue to do so without having a common enemy.
Right.
I mean, we heard Danny tell Brandon, I'll bring my people into the alliance. And Brandon said the same thing. But I don't know that Soka considers themselves his people.
Right.
So I think that the attempt of the Musselboro alliance is going to fail. And once they start standing out, I just think things aren't going to go well for them. I'm not fully sure who the them is, but like you said, I do think Danny has more going on for himself. I think Brandon trying to tell Carson what to do may end up being his mistake. Especially because Carson has heard from Brandon more about wanting Kane out. And of course, Kane is one of Carson's allies.
Right.
So I think that Brandon will become the mayor of Ponderosa.
Look at this.
So now I'm not going to ask Voce because we already know he knows Carolyn. I don't want to put him in the position of, saying something bad about someone he knows potentially. So I won't even ask you.
You're off the hook, Voce.
You're off the hook.
I actually have no idea who goes home next week, so I have a better guess.
Just leave it at that.
So,
Voce, those who don't lie well shouldn't lie at all, right? Yeah. Didn't we just discuss that about Josh for so long?
I have not told a lie. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
See? It's so bad.
A few people.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. You can get access to special podcasts. I think Lindsay is on the Survivor Academy this week. Plus, you get early access to other podcasts like the Deep Dive Rob has been doing. Plus, you get Facebook and Discord. And best of all, you support shows like ours and everything on the network. So again, robhasawebsite.com/patron. Also, make sure you're subscribed to all of the reality TV RHAP Up podcasts by going to robhasawebsite.com/RHAP feed. You select your podcast service of choice, and boom, it's magic. You'll find us, the B&B, Stockwatch, Survivor International, and podcasts on a number of other different shows, all on the RHAP Up. So, make sure you do that. Besides that, I will say that I had talked about last week that I was going to be on another episode of the Tradar podcast about the Traders UK finale, and that did come out. So you can hear me talk about that show, which of course is on Peacock. My next thing will be diving into the Traders Australia, which is also on Peacock, but I didn't want to start till I was done talking about the Traders UK. I didn't want to confuse people or anything like that.
All right, can I do thank yous?
Well, unless Voce has any last thoughts here.
No last thoughts.
No
Just
last thoughts.
always so great to be back. Next time we do this, we need wine and Tiffany.
I have wine. We just don't have Tiffany. So I agree. I think we definitely need Tiffany. So
I think
I would like to say
try again for the postseason.
Let's do it.
Yes.
Wrap up.
Listen. We need
presuming
her
you're not
to be
flying
here.
off somewhere.
I won't. Yeah. No, I'm good. I'm good. You're always a priority, Bloomberg.
Aw, just
when there's not
David.
tornadoes, when there's not sickness, when there's not flights.
Yeah.
There's
You too,
mothers,
Jessica.
I mean, come on. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. I'm like the backup. That's great. I appreciate that. Just a little like asterisk next. Oh yeah, and by the way, that other person that sits there and does this with Bloomberg, her too.
Every Batman needs a Robin.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll be as Robin. So thank you, Voce, for being here. And I will give you a more thorough thank you after I thank Scott St. Pierre for all of the editing that he does for this, not only Why Blank Lost, but all of the RHAP content that you hear. So thank you so much, Scott. You do incredible work. We appreciate it greatly. And also thank you to Will from America for the theme song that he created for this podcast. It's catchy and lovely. Thank you so much. Now, Voce, I think we did pretty well maintaining sides this time.
I do. I agree. I agree with that assessment.
But I think if we bring Tiffany back, the balance might shift a little.
You can have Tiffany. You can.
I'll take Tiffany.
Based on her beam crossing performance. Wait, let me just bring that back just a second. So she had watched the episode. I think it was 2 episodes ago with the beam. In the water, and she's like, "Oh, wait until you watch it. They were just as horrible as I was." And then I watched the episode, and I was like, "Who did you think was as horrible as you were?" I saw them maybe take 1 time extra to get over, but no one was as bad as you were. So if you want Tiffany, Jessica, you can have her.
I'll take her gladly.
I think Jam and Kane had a little trouble getting over it, but nowhere near boom, boom, boom.
What was that? Boom, 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 boom.
Well.
Tiffany.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Tiffany, I love you. I will gladly have you on my team. These 2 Davids over here.
Yes.
But thank you, David Bloomberg, for inviting Voce. I'm so glad that he did join us. And thank you for another very long podcast. What are we doing to our listeners? This is insane. An hour and 48 minutes?
Yeah, it's only 15 minutes longer than usual.
All right. Okay. We can blame Voce.
And we get Voce's opinions, so it's more than worth it.
That is true. That is true.
So
great opinions.
Yes. Thank you, Voce, for picking us over your mom. And finally, we made it work out. So thank you for joining us here. Thank you, as always, Jessica. And thanks to your mom for watching, because we know.
Oh, she loves it. Yes.
So,
I wish I could tell you what my mother texted me during the episode. It's very inappropriate.
Oh my.
I'll tell you when we turn off the recording.
Oh my. Okay.
Love you, Mom. Love you so much. It was so funny.
All right. Well, with that, we will see everyone back here next week at the same time, same channel. And it'll probably just be the 2 of us, but that'll be okay. We'll be talking about the first person officially voted out at the merge. Till then, bye.